The world didn't get safer because you felt good about it. This is Aaron's Smoke Break, Geopolitical Update, where we recognize geopolitical reality and stop pretending. Short break, real world consequences, no bullshit. And if you're still consuming geopolitics like it's a team sport, red versus blue, east versus west, you are missing what is actually happening. Let's dive into our current global reality. All right, here's what we are covering today. Ukraine and Russia, where peace talks don't mean shit if civilians are still getting hit. Ukraine freezing blackouts spreading and what that says about survival versus comfort. Starlink satellites and why modern wars are fought in orbit now, not just on the ground. The Czech Republic, tens of thousands in the streets. NATO politics cracking and why internal instability matters more than headlines. Venezuela, pressure working prisoners getting released and why energy always follows power. The Board of Peace, who said no, and what that tells you about global fragmentation between the US and the has been ignored for a while European established rules-based order. China, the yuan, and why currency is a weapon, whether people want to admit it or not. Critical minerals, because vibes don't mine lithium and supply chains decide winners. And a rapid-fire reality check from around the world that shows this isn't chaos. It's just the world moving. Here we go. Buckle up.
Ready, so get set. So hang on. Strap yourself in. So brace yourself. So fasten your seatbelt.
All right, Russia and Ukraine. Peace talks don't mean shit if buses full of civilians are still getting hit by drones. That's the disconnect people keep refusing to acknowledge. Dmitry Medvedev, former Russian president, now deputy chair of their Security Council, comes out and says Trump is genuinely trying to end the war, that he wants to be remembered as a peacemaker. Now pause right there. Russia does not just praise foreign leaders casually. Let me know what your thoughts are on this one. So when Medvedev says this publicly, it's not about admiration. At the same time, Russian drones hit a bus carrying Ukrainian mine workers in Dnipro. 12 people dead. Not soldiers, just workers. Uncomfortable truth here, ladies and gentlemen, and I really just hate to say this. This is a very uncomfortable reality. I'm just going to tell you all right now. Civilians are legitimate military targets, and here's why. An army needs to eat, it needs clothing, it needs ammunition, it needs a massive amount of supplies. Those supplies need moved, and there's a whole logistic chain that is behind that frontline soldier. For every one frontline soldier, there's probably anywhere from 10 to 30 people supporting it. I know in the military alone, it's at least 10 in support for the one frontline soldier. And there's a whole civilian network that supports it. And that's why civilians are legitimate targets. It's a very uncomfortable reality about war. But how you win wars is you take out who gets the soldiers their food, who gets them their ammunition. So I just want to say that. But as it's always been in war, diplomats and head of state do the talking, soldiers do the dying. Welcome to war. We also learn about surprise meetings in Florida between U.S. and Russian negotiators. No Ukrainian is present at all. But here's the reality. Great powers don't negotiate in public. They negotiate privately. They also let others know where they truly sit at the table. In this case, poor Ukraine.
I think Donkey Kong is the best game ever. Donkey Kong sucks.
You know something? You suck.
You don't have to like that for it to be true. I always say, don't watch what they say publicly. Watch what they do. All right, Ukraine in their winter. Cold blackouts, drones, and they are still fighting. That is what survival looks like. Ukraine is dealing with minus 15 Celsius, dropping to minus 20 in Kyiv. That's 5 Fahrenheit and negative 4 Fahrenheit for you Americans. Nationwide rolling blackouts, energy infrastructure under constant attack. This isn't just war. It's a fight of endurance. And this is where I will always give Ukraine the real credit. In true Iron Curtain fashion, they fight anyway. They know what they are fighting against. Any Eastern European watching this knows exactly what that means. Any Americans whose grandparents were in the Cold War, and especially if they were stationed overseas, they know this. Western Europe, they are panicking quietly because they are realizing something uncomfortable. You cannot outsource survival forever, especially with resource-poor Europe. Security umbrellas aren't permanent. They are conditional. Let me know what you think in the comments. Starlink, Mr. Musk. This is modern war. Satellites matter more than speeches. This is modern war. Satellites matter more than speeches. Ukraine's defense minister publicly thanks Elon Musk because Starlink restrictions are finally disrupting Russian drone operations. Say whatever you want about Elon. This matters because it shows where real power sits right now. Wars used to be about tanks and territory. Now they are about bandwidth, orbit, logistics, and access. Control the infrastructure, you control the battlefield. Or just 2 ways you can go about this. Governments don't fully control that anymore. And that kind of does scare the shit out of a lot of people. I say it's welcome to democracy, ladies and gentlemen. Let me know what you think in the comments. I mean, is this a business having too much power? Let me know. I really want to know what you think on this one. On to the Czech Republic International. Here we go. If you think NATO countries are stable, explain why 80,000 people are protesting Nazi symbolism in 2026. Let that sink in. Tens of thousands of people in Prague backing President Petr Pavel after he blocks a minister nominee tied to Nazi salutes and memorabilia. The president says he was pressured, borderline threatened behind the scenes. The government says it is normal politics. Tell me what normal is. 80 to 90,000 people still showed up. This isn't about one minister. This is about legitimacy. This is how countries destabilize internally, long before tanks roll or borders move. If you think Russia isn't watching this closely, you are kidding yourself. In America, we have freedom of speech. Our Nazis are they're open. As long as they talk and we allow them to talk, we know exactly who they are, who we got to keep an eye on. Welcome to America. Ooh, Venezuela. Pressure works. Appeasement never has. Venezuela announces an amnesty bill. Political prisoners, journalists, opposition figures. This happens after Maduro gets captured in a military operation. Amazing how fast humanitarian language appears when consequences show up. Over 30 political prisoners already released, but families say it is slow. Maria Corina Machado says the transition from the Maduro regime is unstoppable, but warns these concessions may not legally hold. That's the danger zone. Transaction without structure creates chaos. Too much structure delays transition. Chevron gets cleared to process another 100,000 barrels a day of Venezuelan crude. This is the part people pretend not to see. Geopolitics isn't moral. It is transactional.
What do you call a person who can't afford gender reassignment surgery? Transaction declined. God forgive me. Energy
equals leverage. Always has, always will. India also looking into using Venezuela oil after the US and India came to an agreement. India agreed to stop buying Russian oil in return for Trump lowering tariffs. Tariffs don't work, they say. What has Europe done lately to combat Russia's war coffers? Now on to the board of peace. The board of peace, permanent seats cost $1 billion. Sounds noble until you look at which dying empires trying to control the world said no. France, Germany, Italy, the UK, Sweden, Norway, Greece, Slovenia, New Zealand. Why? Because the mandate is too broad, because it undermines the UN, because Russia's involved. I mean, it's a board of peace. Russia's a major player in the world. Even Ukraine said absolutely not. Calling something peace doesn't make it legitimate, they say. Well, I'm sure Ukraine would appreciate it if the UN would actually draw some hard lines with Russia for a change. But hey, I guess they don't appreciate that, which is provided by the board of peace. Sorry, Gaza, your hard line's been drawn. Remember that.
I count 4 major powers in the world right now: the US, Russia, China, and India. Europe doesn't show up on that list of 4 because of Europe allowing itself to be debased by the United States. And the Washington view is, we got enemies. Russia's an enemy. China's an enemy. They're big. They're powerful. We have to somehow keep them in their place because we need to be number 1 in the world. And Europe looks at the US and says, please protect us. Save us from all these nasty people. Daddy, please. Because the US does not like strong leaders. They want leaders that will say daddy to them. And you look at the approval rating of these people, their publics have no confidence at all in Starmer, in Merz, in Macron.
Currencies are weapons. China knows that. China doesn't need to replace the dollar overnight. They just need alternatives. The yuan becomes the second trade finance currency. Dollar dominance slips from 71% to 57%. That's not collapse. That is erosion. And erosion is hegemonies lose leverage, not overnight failures. Critical minerals. You can't win a war or an economy without controlling supply chains. And no, vibes don't mind lithium or let you post about it on social media. Trump announces a $12 billion critical mineral stockpile because everyone finally realized something too late. Green tech, defense tech, and economic independence all rely on the same raw materials. You don't control those. You don't control your future. Sorry, Europe. You don't have them very much in your borders. Look it up. I'm not going to provide a source for this one in my description. On to my odd news roundup. Europe wants a mineral partnership with the US. What do you know? Germany and Poland admit Europe's economy is lagging. The UN is nearing financial collapse because members won't pay their bills. Saudi officials warn not hitting Iran emboldens the regime. Trump squeezes Cuba's oil supply. Mexico publicly pushes back. Privately, not so much. Sorry, Mexico. You kind of know who daddy is after Maduro got kidnapped. I'd be very careful how you act, especially with a Cuba who's friendly to China and Russia. Sorry, that regime, in my opinion, needs to go. Let me know what you think. Vietnam quietly plans for a hypothetical U.S. conflict while saying it's unlikely. They're also preparing for a conflict with China, so I do kind of want to point that out. You know, Vietnam, they have some internal problems going on, but overall, I respect them as a people. They're a resilient people, and they do not fuck around when it comes to fighting foreign influence and powers.
And you were only here for 10 years. You were just a blip in the long history of a proud nation. Vietnam, a land of rich history and resilient people, has faced numerous challenges throughout the centuries. Most notably, their continued efforts at resisting colonization and occupation attempts from the US, preceded by Imperial France and finally by Imperial China, all of which were superpower empires in their respective eras in comparison to the relatively small nation of Vietnam. But each time an outside force attempted to conquer, the Vietnamese people would somehow, against all odds, manage to leave their invaders regretting their decisions.
Like, they're considered communist, kind of along the lines of China, single party, all that. But they don't consider China a friend. They also have a market economy. So, like, they are also kind of mimic China's economy, but they're not friends with China. There's a long history of Vietnam and China. I'll have to cover this in a longer video. But Vietnam does not screw around. They have always been invaded, kind of like Afghanistan. You don't fuck with the Vietnamese. Props to you. Taiwan receives its final Abrams tank, something in the neck of 100. Turkey is in talks to help the U.S. Navy because U.S. ships, they just don't build like we used to. Recognize reality now or pay for it later. This is Aaron's Smoke Break Geopolitical Update, recognizing geopolitical reality whether people like it or not. Short break, real world consequences, no bullshit. Thank you for watching. I'll catch you next time.